Welcome to the Date Forever podcast. Keep your relationship fueled up with strategies discovered by couples and experts. Because at Fuel Collective, we believe better relationships will equal a better world. You are about to discover specific insights and tools that cost little or nothing to implement to help you date forever. And now, here are your hosts, a couple who always have a half-packed suitcase and a date night in the calendar, Sammy and Nathan Yeager.
Hi, and welcome to Date Forever. In this week's episode, we're chatting about why sleeping in separate bedrooms has nothing to do with the state of your relationship, how poor sleep can impact the relationship with yourself and your partner, and the 7 ways you can improve the quality of your sleep. But before we get into that, Sammy, what's been fueling you up this week?
We had a cute date night last week.
Oh, we did, didn't we?
Yeah. I feel like we've been out of rhythm a little bit. We normally do the 2x2x2 thing.
Yeah.
And I had a date planned for us in June, end of June, for the Good Food and Wine show. And then that all went pear-shaped. And then my backup plan went pear-shaped. And then we just had COVID cancelled. And then COVID cancelled again for our weekend away.
And we kind of just wallowed in our own sorrow.
So we've spent quite a bit of time together, but no real fully immersive date experiences though.
Yeah, no real quality time just for the two of us to really be together.
Yeah, well, I think we've had some fun DIY at home upgradey kind of non-screen time together, but not actually romantic time.
No.
Romance.
No, we haven't really.
Yeah, so Friday night we made pizzas from scratch.
And they were delicious.
They were delicious, and we drank a bottle of red, which was also delicious.
Yeah, it was.
And we just kind of hung out. It was really nice.
It was really nice. Yeah, just some dedicated time together.
Yeah, and then we kind of backed it up on Saturday. We went and had a hit of tennis together, which we haven't done for ages.
That was going to be my fuel up. Yeah, I really enjoyed our little tennis date Saturday morning. So we had a potty interview very early Saturday morning, and then it was really nice to get up and moving and head down to the park and have a bash of tennis. Yeah,
it was good. It was nice. We don't tend to exercise together too often. We've dipped in and out of that always, but yeah, it's been a little while. It was fun.
Yeah, it was fun. A little bit rusty to begin with, but we hit our straps. We got into our groove.
Yeah, and I think it was a good reminder that even if you are in lockdown life, it's not a reason to get complacent about creating experiences for each other. If anything, it's an opportunity to get more creative and put in more energy and thought and consideration in how you can. It just requires a little bit of imagination.
Yeah. And then you touched on one of the other things too that we did over the weekend, which was just level up some of our furniture in our house too. So we got rid of a dining table, which we've had since
our very first apartment as housemates.
Yeah, 14 years ago maybe, before we were together.
That table was older than our relationship, and we've been together 13 years.
Yeah, that's it. So, yeah, it was definitely time to level that up. So
yeah, but we leveled it up with a tabletop that we found in hard rubbish.
It's still a level up.
Yeah, so we've gone from a IKEA as-is table to a hard rubbish glass tabletop that's slightly larger.
Yeah. I've got the next level up for the dining table, which is to put my table legs on, which I created in a welding course that I did. So we'll get there. It's just a slow transition to a new table.
Yeah. But yes, I think we're spending so much time at home at the moment that it is nice to be making little upgrades to make sure that our home environment feels really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think this week, fuel ups were lots of little things kind of all pieced together to, feel like we're moving forwards. Now, here's this week's guest.
Today we've got Sondra Kornblatt joining us. She helps people struggling with stress and sleep issues. As a sleep and life coach, she developed a unique program to welcome sleep and your true self through the 7 pathways. She's the author of 4 books on sleep, personal energy, and brain fitness. Welcome to the show, Sondra.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
No problem. It's great to have you. So how did you first get interested in sleep?
I couldn't sleep. What else? Over 20 years ago, I had chronic insomnia. I had on-off insomnia for menopause or anxiety or jet lag, and this was not it. I was awake most nights out of the week in the middle of the night. I'd fall asleep fine, sleep for a couple hours, and then it was like it was 10 a.m. in the morning, even though it was 3 o'clock in the morning. Nothing worked. I did not do pharmaceuticals, but I did everything else: melatonin, eating tryptophan, not eating after 8 o'clock, having a glass of wine, not having a glass of wine, exercising, the whole thing. And I was a parent of 2 young kids, not the best mom of the year when I couldn't sleep, pretty spacey and cranky and, all those wonderful things. And then I had actually a revelation when I was pushing my daughter in the stroller. I realized that, let me back up a minute. I always worked on personal growth. I've always been wanting to be a better person, peeling back the layers that kept me from being authentic, but I didn't have time to practice any of those skills when I had 2 young kids. It's just my hands were busy. But I realized I had time in the middle of the night. What else was I doing besides wanting to sleep? So I started to do some of the skills, some of the tools that I had been learning at the time, and I found that they moved me into this place of deep rest, this kind of rest where you're in bed, but it doesn't really matter. You have thoughts, but they don't really matter. Emotions don't matter. You're just deeply letting go. And I found that in the morning, I had so much more energy and focus. So that made me spend the rest of that bout of insomnia, chronic insomnia, which lasted about a year. It was from some other medications that I was taking. But I started to explore what deep rest was like. What were the obstacles, how to move to deep rest, and what did it give you? Aside from being more focused and more energized, it welcomed sleep. So that's a long answer to a short question.
No.
But that's really how it got started.
So how was that chronic insomnia impacting your relationship with yourself at that time?
That's a great question. I was really angry at myself. It was like, why can't I sleep? Sleep is something that you just kind of do. You don't have to think about it. And then during the day, if I was cranky, I'd be mad at myself for being cranky because it wasn't the best way to be. And I just felt like it just was a spiral of going down on how I felt about myself. It's a really good question. Was really impactful.
And how was it impacting the relationship with, I'm assuming, your partner if you had 2 little kids?
Yep, I was married. Well, it didn't make things better, that's for sure.
Yeah.
It's just because, a relationship is always a certain level of communication and presence and listening, and my abilities to communicate and be present and listen were not that high. Yeah. So, he was defensive, I was snappy, I was defensive. It wasn't great. And I was also jealous. He's the kind of person who can sleep next to a highway, just like drop him off and tell him to sleep. And he was like, I'm out of it.
Sondra.
Sounds like me.
Yeah, I have, what did you call it? Like sleep jealousy. Yeah, I get super resentful. Nath can be asleep in 7 seconds and head on the pillow and he's out snoring. And I'm like, I haven't even got energetically to a place where I could fall asleep yet, let alone, and I get super resentful.
And you're wake me up if I fall asleep too quickly.
Waking you up sounds like a really good answer. I understand the urge to it. It's wake up and sit in this
discomfort with me.
You were like, oi, how did you fall asleep that quickly? You were like,
especially if we were still chatting and
Yeah, sometimes it is mid-conversation in bed or something and I'll fall asleep and you'll poke me and wake me back up.
I know, I've got some growth area to sit in my own discomfort alone rather than bring you into it. But yeah, I have sporadic issues with sleep. There's probably a handful of nights a month where I just don't sleep.
The whole night?
The whole night, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and we've tried to clock it against whether or not it's my menstrual cycle, whether or not it's stress, or whether there's something else going. We haven't quite found the magic thread yet. But yeah, it's when your sleep is disrupted, it's really uncomfortable.
Oh yeah. I think that people can live longer without food than they can without sleep. So it's it reframes our whole experience, our emotional experience, our mental experience, our health experience, our sense of who we are with dreams. It's an amazing miracle. It's just a gift that we have it, and it shows up when we don't.
Yeah, I've definitely heard that driving while extremely fatigued is worse than driving under the influence of alcohol.
Really?
Yeah.
That would make sense. That would make sense.
Impairing-
Yeah.
Impacting all of your senses and your response times and things like that. So in your bio, we mentioned that you've developed these 7 pathways. Maybe tell us a little bit about those.
So, when I was looking at deep rest and how it helped, I looked at the obstacles to rest. And through that, I developed pathways that we could help me and my clients move through what comes up so that you're more able to rest. So the first one is, what is your relationship to sleep and what is your relationship to rest? Because one of the things that can keep you awake the most is chasing sleep. It's sort of like the image I have is if you have a cat and the cat escapes the front door and you go after the cat and you scream at it, "Come back here, cat." The cat's going to just like run away. And it's the same thing with sleep. It's like if sleep isn't coming and you're like, "Come back here, sleep." It's like, "I'm out of here. I'll get you in a couple hours maybe." But the truth is that when you allow yourself to rest, you're beginning the phase of sleep. And as long as you don't continue to monitor how you're sleeping and whether you're sleeping and whether you're there yet, your body can start to settle in more and more and open the door to sleep. So that's the first piece to look at, the first pathway. The second pathway is your relationship to your environment. It's not just having a soothing environment, but it's how do you create a sense of a cocoon for yourself and really settle in, and how do you manage when it's imperfect? Because environments are, last I checked, not always perfect. Can you let go enough so that you can allow space for yourself? Then your relationship to your body. People often feel like their body's kind of a second-class citizen that carries their mind around. So they give their bodies the minimum daily requirements of things, sort of like paying it minimum wage. I'll exercise, I'll eat well, but only enough that my mind stays alert, instead of really tapping into what it feels like to be in your body. And that opens the door to rest. The next is your relationship to your mind. I'm guessing, Sammy, that when you can't sleep, your mind is kind of going a little bit.
Yeah.
You're most people. The next is your relationship to emotions. So how to find space around emotions so that even when you're feeling sad or anxious or whatever, you still can find a place to move into rest. Your relationship to a bigger presence, something bigger than what you are, could be community, could be a spiritual connection, could be your connection to nature. And then the last is your relationship to your sense of self and purpose. Because if you don't have a sense of being grounded in life, it's very hard to come back to who you are when you're resting. So those are the pathways. And then we usually create a lullaby, help people create the tools that work for each of those pathways so they can move into rest.
So how do sleep cycles and needs differ between guys and girls?
I'm not completely sure in terms of, I don't think that there's a huge difference. I'm sure there are individual variations. But I do think that one of the things that can be interesting is that men tend to compartmentalize. So whether it's from the cortex, there's a membrane in the middle of the left and right hemispheres. It's different with men and women. But men can tend to say, I'll deal with that later. I'll deal with that tomorrow. And women often carry so much more comprehensively. And so I think sometimes it's hard to let women let go. There's hormones that women go through in terms of menstrual cycle and menopause. And then, in my mind, there's a bit of sexism, that when men expect women to carry all the burden for house cleaning and for memory and all that stuff, it's a stress for women. And so that can also be a difference.
So if we've got a troubled relationship with sleep, or we're going through a patch or we're having difficulty with sleep, what does a really great sleep routine or sleep hygiene look like?
I just wrote an article actually on my take on sleep hygiene. I think there's some wonderful things about sleep hygiene. And I think the key piece is for people to ask themselves what feels really good rather than following the should rules. So that's a key piece. But, I think that having a regular sleep cycle, honoring how much your body needs. So say, I'd like to go to bed at 10 and wake up at 8 in the morning or 7 in the morning. And maybe you're not there, but really honoring that that's what your body needs and being able to move towards it. Having a bedroom that's cool, dark, and quiet as it can be is a great thing. Moving sometime during the day, and if you're going to move intensively, to do it 3 hours before you go to bed because it heats up your body. Alcohol, caffeine, nicotine all affect your sleep cycles, not for a great way. And one of the things that I say is to make your bed a place of comfort and rest, so that if you're really struggling and you can't stop and move to rest, then maybe you can get out of bed. But I believe that if you're learning how to rest and you're staying in bed, that you're not creating the negative sleep cycles where you have to get out of bed unless you're fast asleep.
One of the interesting things which we've found recently is like going into our bedroom and making sure that it's actually clean and tidy and the bed's made and stuff like that when we're ready to go to bed. Because I feel like one of the worst things is going into the bedroom when you're ready to go to sleep and then there's clothes all over the bed or something, or it's trash.
Windows still
and then you
open.
have to actually switch your brain back on to then kind of tidy all that up and then hop into bed. And by the time you've done that, you've kind of undone all of your
Nathan, that's a great way of saying it. Yes. I mean, when I talk about the environment, for me, I also talk about not having things in the bedroom that remind you of the day. So if you have laundry that needs to be done, to put a towel over it, even just that, or move it to another part of the bedroom so that you really allow your bed to be what it's there for, which is not not your working environment.
No, it's not.
Your part of your storage.
Yeah, this is really interesting that you've touched on this, because late last year we were at Date with Destiny with Tony Robbins, and we were talking about my relationship with my feminine and Nate's relationship with his masculine energy and what that kind of looks like and how we could better create our bedroom to purely be a space for sleep and rest and sex. And it shouldn't really be for anything else. And so we've made some really conscious decisions to put to change a couple of things, like the way that the cupboards, that they now have doors on them, so you can't actually see the clutter that's there.
Excellent.
And it's, and things like we've changed the lamps that we've got, and just these little kind of tweaks that have definitely, and we've got some new linen that have definitely changed the vibe and the energy in that space, and we've definitely made it more consciously a sanctuary. But yeah, if there's a bunch of laundry or shoes, or like if the dirty
Clothes
laundry
is
overflowing or something, it definitely disrupts the way that I relate with that space. I don't know if I'm overthinking it, but I feel I definitely feel like it makes an impact for me. So I'd love to know your take, Sondra, if couples have sort of started, they've been in a dating phase where they've probably been going between one house and another house and sleeping in different beds and sleeping on different routines, and then they're trying to find a rhythm that works for both of them most of the time. Is there a good way to sort of start doing that?
That's a great thing to say, most of the time. So you really honor the fact that people are individuals and their sleep habits are different. So to really, just honor what is important for you about going to bed. Is it important for you both to fall asleep close to the same time and have that sort of transition time? Or do you like to wake up together? And to just have that as part of a conversation, instead of we think that the way we do things is normal. I mean, that's just, we normalize things in our lives. So it's like, my late husband was, he was a night owl. He'd stay up until 2 a.m, and for him that was normal. And for me, it was like, that's really late, but, wanting to be with him. It was a little odd, but I think that experimenting and communication, let's try this tonight in a couple weeks or a week or so, and let's see how it feels over time, and then talk about it again.
Because I think for us, it's always been really important for us that we go to bed together. But then quite often in the mornings, we'll get up at different times and things like that. And that can then end up throwing out one of our sleep cycles, because one of us has slept a lot longer than the other person. And so when we try and go to bed together, then we've kind of thrown each other out. So I think we've still got some working to do in that space and try and work out an actual routine that works for both of us.
Yeah, and that's tricky. And then, you might ask, how many nights a week can you go to bed together and still feel both like your heart is being filled with that relationship?
Yeah, and I know that across our relationship, especially when we've had different working schedules, like I spent the first sort of 10 years in my career in the events industry. And I would have really intensive periods where I was on site at events and just not around at all. And I was clocking very little sleep.
Getting home at 2 a.m. kind of thing. And,
getting home then, and then still needing to wind down and sort of transition away from the day and then into sleep. And I do think that our relationship and our rhythm around sleep definitely impacted our relationship at those times. But then also how and when we were having sex in relation to sleep and whether or not those two behaviors were anchored together or not.
Yeah, those are good questions. I mean, I don't think there's one right answer because everybody's individual, but it really is making sure that your assumptions and your hopes and what you want are clear and you allow the other person to address hearing them and responding to them.
Yeah. I don't know if you've got the magic bullet, but do you have any advice or recommendations for couples who are polar opposites in terms of one likes to be really warm and toasty and the other one likes to be cooler, and that really light sleeper and the heavy sleeper combo?
So my late husband and I had different blankets. We had one sort of softer blanket over the top to make the bed look like it was made up, but we had two separate blankets because, I didn't want to have the bed war, in terms of that's my blanket, you're pulling it, it would wake me up. So, and we also had different temperatures. So I think that's it. And then my parents used to sleep on it. And I thought it was pretty common that a king size bed is actually the size of two single beds, put side by side. And they had kinds that could actually separate a little bit. But I think that trying to find a bed situation that works for you, because sleeping with another person, if you're a light sleeper and if you're tense about sleeping, you can just be easily awakened and feel somewhat betrayed, actually. Why did you wake me up when I was sleeping, which is not necessarily logical, but you would rather be asleep. So I think that looking at being close and connected, but not necessarily having to be in the same cocoon together, is a key piece. And then different sleep cycles. I mean, I think it's a matter of talking about, when can you get that time? Because I think the thing about going to bed is that there's nothing else on your plate. It's not like, oh, we're sitting here, but it's like, oh, I really need to answer that email, or, oh, I need to do this. It's that letting go time. It reminds me of my daughter is an athlete and she drives a lot. So oftentimes I would talk to her when she's driving, which was a different kind of conversation than when we just called to talk, because there was this unending time and our thoughts could go everywhere. And that's the same kind of thing about not having something on your to-do list and welcoming sleep where you have that connection. So if you can't have that around going to bed, when can you have that kind of time?
It's funny that you say that, because something we've noticed probably over the last couple of years is that we'll quite often go to bed and we will have been with each other for the whole evening or something, and then we'll go to bed and it's at that time that we actually start chatting. And we'll sit there
really
and chat
chatting.
for properly having a conversation. Whereas we've been sitting with each other over dinner and or watching a TV show or something afterwards, and we've been together for 3 or 4 hours or something, not really spoken all that much, and then we'll get into bed together, and that's when our brains kind of switch on and we actually start having deep conversations.
I know. We need to anchor our routines to accommodate for the chat.
Yeah, and I would say even more than your brain switch on is that your heart opens. It's like your brain was probably operating just fine when you were chatting, but it was more about the surface stuff. But it's the deeper, unexpected, who are you today that can come up when you're about to relax and let go.
Oh, I love that. I'd never thought about it like that. So, Sondra, another question for you around this conflicting sleep patterns is, what if one of the people in the partnership is a snorer?
Well, I think there's a lot to be said for CPAP machines. They're a pain, but there are some smaller ones now available as well. So I think snoring is worth checking out to make sure that there's no sleep apnea. I mean, that also keeps your relationship and that person's attention better in life. I think that for the person hearing the snore, one of the issues that can come up is that if there's ways that, and most of us grew up because the way the culture is, there's ways that we grew up where we didn't get all our needs met. And so sometimes for many people, there's a sadness about people not being seen or not being heard and not being understood. So if one person is snoring and the other person gets activated with that part of, you don't understand me, you are not there for me, I feel so deeply hurt. It has nothing to do with the snoring. It has to do with those emotions coming up. Are you with me so far? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's a matter of being able to separate the sound from your emotional reaction and not necessarily making them, one might activate the other, but they're not the same thing. And then other things you can do is just do a listening meditation, which is just as if you're a microphone rather than a reactive person of just hearing sounds come and go. You certainly can ask the snorer to turn on their back or on their side or whatever is going to make them snore less. And I also am a fan, if you have another place, one of you has another place to sleep so that you both get good night's sleep.
I love that you brought this up because we've got a few friends who do shift work and like rotating roster type of shift work, so it's not consistent. What are your thoughts on sleeping in separate beds? What are the pros? What are the cons? How does it impact our relationships?
If you have in mind that the only good relationship is one where people sleep together, then sleeping in separate beds will feel like a knife to your heart. You know, it's like, and you can't necessarily speak to that, but I think that the whole point about being in a relationship is caring for the other person as well as caring for yourself. And so I think even if you sleep together in the same bed, there will be times that you feel like you want to have alone time and then together time and alone time. That's just how you are human. And so I think that it's a matter of allowing that kind connection to happen, that gentle, no hurry being with each other, assuming you don't have small kids, assuming your life is not in an urgency. Those are wonderful things to have. And then again, just certainly communicate. So it's not someone leaving in a huff. I can't sleep with you. I'm going to sleep in this separate bed. It's more like, I love you. I'm glad to spend time with you. And I'm going to go snooze over here.
I really like that you've brought that up because my grandparents, I've never known them to have the same bedroom. They've always had separate bedrooms, slept separately. So I think I have a vision that a relationship can be really successful and long-term, and it's not an indicator of some other thing that's going on. Because I think we talk about, you know, when couples are in distress or they're fighting or there's friction, they're sleeping in separate rooms, and it's almost as if that's a diagnostic or that's a symptom of a relationship being poor. Whereas I've had an experience where they're not related at all, and their relationship's beautiful, but they have always slept in separate beds. Yeah, so I like that you've questioned the story around sleeping separately as opposed to the behavior.
Right.
And I think touching back on something else which you mentioned before, it's that when you do get a good night's sleep and a really restful night's sleep, that you do show up as a better person the next day. So I guess too, like if you do get much better sleeping separately, then you can actually show up for your partner and be a better partner and better in that relationship the next day. So maybe it is actually beneficial for some relationships to sleep separately.
Right. Yep.
So Sondra, last kind of cheeky one. Should we be sleeping nude or in pajamas?
Yes. So I think the issue is that you should change your clothing when you go to bed. So if you take off your clothing, you get dressed in your birthday suit. Yeah. You know, there it is. If you put on PJs, I think that, you know, for me, even in the last heat wave that we just had here in the Pacific Northwest of the U.S., I needed to have something over my shoulder because if I was breathing on my arm, it was just like, what, you know? And so do what makes you happy. And I don't think that there's any rule. I could make one up if you want.
No rules is the rules. I like that.
And I guess the thing is too, like if one of you is like really hot in bed and the other one's like much cooler, then maybe it's that difference there. If one person wears pajamas, the other person doesn't, or like you wear different pajamas or something
That's
like
us.
that. So
what Nick has described is us.
That's definitely us.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I was listening to a podcast a while ago with a man called Alan Badane or something. I can't remember. I'm sorry, but he talks about romantic love and the confusion that we have with romantic love and the images that we have about romance and how they get in the way. But he said the very first thing he said you should say when you're meeting with somebody and thinking about getting together is, I have to tell you, I'm a really difficult person to get along with, because he said, everybody is. Everybody's a difficult person to get along with. And so the idea that both of you should sleep naked, or both of you should sleep in pajamas, or both of you should be doing the same things at all times, I think is a symbol rather than really who you are as an individual being in a relationship. Just finding ways that you have that ability to be separate and individual and connected at the same time.
Yeah, I really like that.
Hey.
So, Sondra, before we wrap up, can you just give us your number one top tip for getting a good night's sleep?
Well, number one top tip. That's tricky. I think the number one top tip is to not chase sleep. I think is to really play with, experiment, be curious about, what does rest feel like to you? How does rest affect your mind? Where are you holding on? What does letting go actually feel like for yourself? And really understanding that wake to sleep is a process. So instead of you having an on-off switch on your body like we have on our computer, a sleep button, we don't have a sleep button on our bodies. And so really just playing with, how do you move into deep rest and what gets in its way, because things do, and how can you be kind to yourself and be able to just move more and more into a place that's restful and welcome sleep, but again, not chasing after it.
Yeah, I love that.
Hey, Sondra, this has been really lovely. Thank you so much for joining us. This is a really big part of the time that we spend together in our relationships, and like we talked about in your own journey about how our relationship with sleep impacts our relationship with ourselves and the people around us. So thank you for taking the time to talk with us. We at Fuel Collective, we've got a couple of core beliefs about dating forever and really actively getting to know yourself and your partner, and doing that in a really proactive way. And then living the life that you want to love together, not just like it, but you really love the life that you're living. But also to be the change and take accountability for what you have influence over in your own world, but also in the big wide world too. So to say thank you for joining us today, we've given 100 days of medication to nursery school students in Ethiopia. It helps them get a really great head start on getting on top of really, basic diseases and infections. So taking care of their health in the beginning sets them up for long term. So thank you so much for making that possible.
It's lovely.
No worries. So, Sondra, if people want to connect with you or learn a little bit more about what you do, how should they do that?
I have a website, restfulinsomnia.com. That's restfulinsomnia.com. If they'd like, they can also sign up I have a PDF and audio called First Steps to Deeper Rest, and it sort of guides you through a way to connect with your body to let go. I also do free consultations. I work with people around the world on coaching and helping them move into a place of deeper rest. And I have free consultations. You can find that on the website. I also dabble a little bit on Facebook, Restful Insomnia, and on LinkedIn. It's easier to find it through my name, Sondra Kornblatt there. And then on Twitter, Restful Insomnia as well.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much.
Well, I hope everybody who's having sleep issues reaches out and connects and has a bit of a chat and uses some of those free resources. Thank you so much for sharing your genius with us.
Wonderful. It was great to talk to you. It was really great to talk about sleep and relationships. It's something that you both are just very clear about who you are in relationships, and there were great questions. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks heaps for joining us. If you love what we're doing here and want more, subscribe to the Date Forever podcast to make sure you never miss an ep. Come and hang out with us and other awesome couples who are fueling up their relationships in the Thriving Couples Collective Facebook group, or check us out at fuelcollective.com.au. Until next time, keep on dating, because better relationships equal a better world.